welcome back to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Analiza Quiroz Wolfe, author of The Myths of Success, A Woman of Color's Guide to Leadership. Welcome, Analiza.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me.
Well, I want to start out by talking about your book and why you wrote this. What stands out to me about it is having been a woman in leadership for most of my career, and sometimes the only woman at the table. I can't imagine also adding on to that the factor of being a woman of color, because it's tough for women in leadership and executive roles, and that's just another factor that you add on to that, right? So I'd love to start out by having you talk to us about why you wrote this book and kind of who it is for.
Thanks, Kelly. So the reason I wrote this book is because I had always wanted to learn about how to have the most impact. I'm a service-oriented person. My parents immigrated from the Philippines. I was born in San Diego, California, and I wanted to give back. I served in the Air Force. I went on to start schools for low-income students of color. And you would think that, I work hard, and, I'd gone to these different schools and I had gotten really good performance reviews. Why not grow in my career? And what I realized was that time and time again, I would get passed over for promotion. I would be burning out. I would be confronted and in tears about, what hadn't worked out and that I needed to switch roles, that I didn't realize that I wasn't alone. And it wasn't until really later in my career, Kelly, after a lot of tears, that I was part of this trend. I'd gone to Northwestern, I'd gone to Stanford, I'd had mentors, but no one ever told me, Analiza, as a woman, as a person of color, there are experiences that we'll likely face, and when those happen, be prepared, or let's prepare now. So that's this book. I had aspired to, learn from people. There were not that many women leaders of color who I could even work for, let alone, ask questions to. And so I did this podcast, Women of Color Rise. I'm luckily now, later in my career, I have friends who very top roles. I could ask for their leadership paths. And when I looked across the trends and looked at the research, I said, we want to have, please, someone to say there's all these myths that many of us believe. They're not true. If you can get over them, you can fast track your career and fast track the impact that you want to have. So that's that book. It's also written, I have 2 kids, but particularly for my daughter, I want her to know that she can be a leader too if she wants to. And she told me, I want to be a professional soccer player, also president of the United States. And so I love that for her. You can, these are possible things for you.
Yeah. So it reminds me of early on in this podcast, I had, oh my gosh, her name is escaping me at the moment, Dr. Lois Frankel, author of Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office, or Nice Girls Never Get the Corner Office, something like that. Anyways, she talked about, so she and I think it was after the recording, not during the podcast interview. I had mentioned to her that my daughter was in college, and that, she was going to be going out there into the workforce in a couple of years, and how much the world has changed in the last 20 years since I, entered the workforce. And she was saying how, really, like, your daughter is going to be shocked when she starts to work, because she's like, it has changed, but it is not, like, it is still tough for women to, have a career path and be, in leadership roles. And anyways, it was just kind of that comment that she made where I realized, like, okay, like, yeah, it is going to be probably a little more shocking to my daughter than and again, not a woman of color, but a woman in the workplace. And then you add that other factor in there. So this book is helping women of color who are in the workplace, dealing with some of the things maybe that you have experienced. So how do you share, like, the stories? How do you kind of approach that in the book, and, like, how you tell about your experiences? I struggle with that a little bit because, it's like, I know if I verbalize some of my experiences, it's like I'm also um, saying negative things maybe about people I've worked with in the past or like bosses or things where I'm like, how do you tell these stories without like, you know, I don't know, I guess uh, drawing attention to certain things that you maybe don't want don't want to come back to you. Like, do you just like put it out there and you're not worried about kind of what other people take away from that, or like how how that I don't know, just how if they see what you've written about your experiences?
So, first of all, when I wrote the book, it was about, because I had done, now it's almost 100 podcasts. I had this beautiful arc of amazing women leaders of color who had shared their stories. And so the book includes 10 myths, and each of those myths are backed up by story after story after story after story about these incredible women leaders of color who've had this similar experience. And that allows me, then I thought, well, Kelly, I don't have to talk about myself because that's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, right? One of the myths is like,
Yeah.
be humble, don't promote yourself. That's so uncomfortable. And I didn't really want to, right? I wanted to uplift others. And when I turned it into my editor, she said, it's missing you. You're an important part of this. You need to talk about yourself. And so I had this question, Kelly, what
Oh,
do I
interesting.
do? Because how am I going to talk about this trauma that I faced? And it's kind of obvious who I'm talking about if you really know my
Yes.
career. And so here's how I did it. I said, here, I talked about my childhood and getting bullied and how that, led me to, not want to, it was scary and I didn't want to talk to people about it, and I learned to bury my feelings. And I talked about the arc of my career, but then I got to, specific themes. And I said, I remember when on a Monday, after working 3 different jobs and getting the highest performance reviews and also the salary to go with it, the promotion was locked in. Like, I had told my family, book the celebration dinner. Like, let's go at 6 p.m., we're going to celebrate. But when it came time that Monday at 3 p.m. and they all gathered around to share who was getting promoted, it wasn't me. And that's the kind of story I share, is I don't have to say, well, it was that guy, it was that boss, and that was, but I share, this is what happened, and it's because of these reasons. So I don't have to like point out any names. I just
Yeah.
name specific examples that share, here's why I know personally what this pain is, because I myself have felt it, and I don't have to speak to a specific boss or a job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you knew what I was saying when I'm asking it, because it's like as I'm like writing some of my stories, or when I'm on podcasts and I'm telling my stories, I'm always so careful about things I say, because I'm like, well, gosh, as soon as I say that, like that former coworker will know. I mean, not that they're gonna listen to everything I say or read everything, but you just still feel like once you put it out there, like you're exposing something and drawing attention to someone, and it's uncomfortable, right? But you can't talk about these things without sharing the experiences you had, because there's so much about it that is it's hard to even like word the experience, like put words to the experiences that you have, um, and then let alone like then not being able to talk about certain situations or whatever, um, I don't know. So it's interesting that you had like different women's stories in there, so you're able to share the experiences that not just you. It's not just you saying like, this happened to me or whatever, but multiple women sharing their stories. What are some of the stories that are shared in the books? Is there something that any that stand out that you can share with us?
Sure, I'll share a story about a woman, so a black woman, and she grew up where her like her grandfather was like working on frankly, like was a slave, right? Like in that world was a son of a slave. And she was talking about how, being raised in this environment, her grandparents loved her so much, and at the same time they taught her to say, yes ma'am, yes sir, especially to white people. And she was explaining how when she got into the work world, that if you, to that point, like nice girls don't get the corner office, if you're being deferential and saying like, oh Kelly, yes ma'am, yes, ma'am, whatever you say, ma'am, like you don't have leadership presence and also inspire much confidence. She had to get over these, I love my grandparents. I know that they meant well for me, but at the same time, these ways of being are holding me back from changing how the system runs. And she explained how she had to stand up in power and make sure her voice was heard and not be the person asking to, Kelly, can I sit here? And the person in the background, we had to learn, she was sharing how she had to learn to sit in power seats, power stances, make her voice heard, use words that showed that she was confident even though she wasn't, build relationships with people who her grandparents had told her to avoid. And because it was so much of it was fear and so much of it was a new skill, and that when she eventually started to practice these, that's when she got noticed, and she eventually got a top seat in her organization. So I mentioned that because it comes from, a lot of these stories are about our childhood and how we learn these myths that were taught to us because they were meant to keep us safe, but they have held us back, and we got to let them go.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting. It again reminds me of Lois Frankel's book, because she talks about a lot of the things that women do that we shouldn't do. I can't remember it. Like yours is like myths. I don't think hers is myths, but it's like mistakes that women make in the workplace. It's almost like the opposite approach to it. It's not like the myths that you're debunking. It's like, here's the things you should not be doing, right? Like every single chapter. And like I remember things like, don't basically like don't be the person that's bringing food to the office, because you're seen as like the person serving people. And anyway, she talks about a lot of those kinds of things. So in like anyone who's listening to this episode who's interested in this topic, in addition to Analiza's book, I think that's another good one to consider. So I want to talk about the myths. So you said there's 12, is there 12 myths in the book?
There's 10.
Oh, 10. Okay. So what are some of the myths that you kind of debunk in your book?
So the first myth in the book is that you're not worthy. And it seems obvious, right? Like, Kelly, Analiza, of course we're worthy. But if we get down to the inner child, many of us have learned through parents, school, community, TV, that unless you look a certain way and you are like, talk as tall as a certain way, you're not enough. I went to business school, and that's actually how we make money, right? Is that you market a product because you find the insight, and an insight is a way of saying where is the customer's most raw that they're willing to spend money to solve the problem. So you're not skinny enough, you're not fast enough, your house is not clean enough, you're not wearing the right outfit enough. And we can help you. You pay a certain amount of money and we will solve that problem so that you will feel enough. So it's a whole, that's how our whole industry is based on this. And it's a lie, right? It's a lie from the get-go. If you happen to have children or children in your life, you look at those messy souls and you also realize that they're perfect as they are, all messy and with all their errors and humanity. I want them to know that you are perfect as you are. Yes, there's things to work on, but you're enough. And that's a lot of what, honestly, these incredible women leaders of color have shared. A lot of pain has been not feeling enough. How can I possibly be CEO? I'm not blank enough. And to get over that, to say, I am enough and I can. And yes, I make mistakes. I'm guessing from Kelly, from the other book you talked about, one of the things that you don't want to do is like try to be a perfectionist. That stuff will hold you back and you'll never be perfect, frankly. So that's a big myth, is you are not worthy.
Yeah, that's great. So how have you seen your book impact the lives of women who have read it?
It's been really beautiful to hear back from readers about where they see themselves in the book, and that makes me so happy. I often create, we'll talk about maybe the other books that I've written, Kelly, in the past, but they've all come because I personally had faced this pain, or I've seen this for my children, and I wanted to be able to solve it, is to say, if it's not out there, what can I do to help others, including myself, understand that we're not alone? So I want to mention that because it's a way in which we can have books that reflect our experiences, and that's how you can get it out there, is to go to the people who also experience that pain. Yeah. My clients experience that pain, and I can point to, you're not alone. You can actually look at my book, the podcast, the research. It says, this experience that you're having, you're not alone.
Yeah. I want to come back to your comment about your other books, but I also want to mention I have had a lot of Filipino women on my team, actually women and men on my team over the years, and I can say, like, my experience oftentimes with the Filipinos is like the cultural challenge of being in leadership, right? Like, especially for women, and the age different. Now, I guess you grew up here in the United States, not in the Philippines, so maybe that wasn't as challenging for you. That part wasn't as challenging for you as, like, maybe it would have been for your mom. But I know, like, I had one Filipino woman on my team who I put her in charge of somebody else who was older than her, and that was like a really big challenge because the Filipino culture is like, and I've have not been to the Philippines, just from my experience when working with her, and like the things that she would bring to me was like, it was really hard for her to give feedback to an older woman because the older woman would treat her as if she should be I don't know, like there's a respect thing with age, and I had to kind of coach her around, like, I don't care how old you are, and I don't care how old the person that reports to you is, like, you are her manager. Like, you need to act like the manager, and like, she had to get over mentally some of that stuff. And I think in the U.S., I would say that it's not, that the age thing is not quite as big of a challenge, but like, I know that with that culture, that was a factor that we had to kind of work through. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I like I said, I've had a lot of Filipino women and men on my team, mostly women, but and I have enjoyed, like, having that diversity on my team, and also, like, I've seen firsthand some of the challenges that they have faced in leadership, especially when you get promoted to a position where you're like, I now have to coach other people, and just how some of that works. So it's really interesting. Have you, like, was that part of what you dealt with also, like the internal messages that you told yourself based on, like, the culture that you had in your house, and like how your parents kind of, the messages that you got growing up?
Oh, absolutely. As a Filipino, proud Filipino, it was, you're seen, not heard. You are here to do as I say. Don't question authority. Go along to get along. We don't bring up hard topics, but apparently we gossip. And above all else, like, respect. So respect your elders, respect authority,
Yeah.
respect everything around you, respect the rules, follow along, don't cause a scene, respect. So those all make sense to me, but
Yeah.
you can see that's not going to get you very far in leadership. Like, you need to be able to be commanding, make decisions. It is hierarchical. There's conflict. You need to be able to face it, and deal with ambiguity and complexity. So you have to unlearn, just like that story I shared earlier. Yes, we appreciate our culture and we love our culture and where we come from, but some of these rules, if we want to be able to get to the corner office, we need to be able to let them go and decisively move into our own unique, authentic leadership style.
Yeah. So you mentioned your other books. So tell us a little bit about the other books that you have out there in addition to The Myths of Success.
Sure. So my first book is called Balik Bayan, A Filipino Homecoming. It's about me going back to my homeland in the Philippines and living in my father's old childhood home and getting to meet his family. I was also on a Fulbright, so I was studying prostitution. So imagine me, I think my 20s, so I was going into bars at night and trying to buy drinks for women so that they would tell me, how did you end up choosing to be a prostitute? And the stories were so hard, like tore at my heart. I learned a lot about myself and also my family. So that was the first book. And then the next 3 books are children's books. I mentioned earlier that I write books because I hope that they'll fill a need, that they'll serve others. And my first book was called Asian Americans Who Inspire Us. And it was because I grew up myself reading Sweet Valley High, blonde, blue-eyed twins, and I thought that that was what beauty looked like, popularity looked like. I wanted to look like them. And I really wanted my kids to not think that. And so I didn't see a lot of books out there with people who looked like us, which is what led us to that book, Asian Americans Who Inspire Us, and then later Latin Americans Who Inspire Us, and then later Native Americans Who Inspire Us. So those are the series of children's books.
Oh, I love that. Who are some of the Asian Americans who inspire us that you included in the book?
So Christy Yamaguchi is in there, as you probably know, an Olympic skater. She was after she started skating. By the way, did you know that she started skating because she had club feet? It was actually a therapy. They were trying to straighten out her legs. And she realized that she was good at it. She was not that athletic because she's kind of tiny, but she realized that being small works on the ice. So Christy Yamaguchi's in it. David Ho is in it. He, during the AIDS crisis, people thought, oh, I can't even be with people with AIDS. They're going to get me sick. But he showed, actually it's not transmitted through touch of hands. You can actually be around it, and we can help people with AIDS heal. So I got to meet him, which is so special. My son and I got to meet him. I actually wrote these books, Kelly, with my kids. So can you imagine, you're looking at a list and they're asking me, I don't know who to choose. There's so many options. I mean, how amazing for kids to see that. So I love doing that and being able to interview some of the people with my kids, getting to listen in and ask questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, so you mentioned writing the books, the children's books with your kids. Tell me about the writing process for The Myths of Success. Did you, I like the way that you structured that, like the way that you mentioned having, the 10 myths and you have stories from other women. How did you, just approach the process? How did you sit down and start structuring it and writing the book? I think that's the biggest hurdle a lot of people have, right? Is how do I start?
Okay, so I have to say that I was hesitant to write the book, and it's not because I hadn't written books before. I had. It was because it's a lot of work, right? And you want to you want to make sure you're spending time, but it just feels like with so many back-to-back meetings, where do you find the time and space to write? So that I actually had at the time a mentor who is Asian American herself, and she said to me, write it. If you're going to write it, write it. You keep talking about it and you keep thinking about the structure, write it. And for me, I'm an executive coach myself, which is why I don't think AI will take over our jobs, because the beauty of it is, yes, we ask questions, but we also say the hard thing, and then we meet with them next to see actual action and momentum and accountability. So because of her and because of my personality, I said, well, I don't want to disappoint her. I'm going to write this. I don't work well to say, oh, after this podcast, Kelly, I'm going to start writing. That's not my best writing self. I've written all of my books pretty much at 5 a.m. in the morning. I slot time, I sit down and I write it. For this book, I had the structure, but I actually was on a cruise with my mom and my kids, and my mom was so kind to spend time with the kids that I would just hole up in my little room and I would just write. And I had an outline of what I wanted to get done. And so there were some late nights where after dinner I would sit down and I would just write. This was before AI. My gosh, I don't know what it's like now to write books, but yeah, I wrote, and by the time the cruise was ended, I had a draft. And then I had good friends who were willing to read it, give me feedback. I hired an editor, and I got it to the finish line. I think that's actually how I got the Asian Americans Who Inspire Us book also out. I wanted to give it as a gift to my kids for Christmas, and it was aggressive. I was like this summer and I wanted to give it for Christmas, so that was a bit aggressive. But I think by having a timeline where you say, I am going to get it out, I have this set amount of time to write it, and then I chunk out the chapters so I just get it done and just get it done. And it might not be the best work, who cares, like move on to the next thing. And I think because of that, I was able to write this book. Thank you to my mentor.
Yeah, I love that. I actually recently had an episode. By the time this comes out, it'll be a few months ago, but I had an episode with Carla Andrasik, and her book is Stop Trying, I think is the title of the book. But we just had this whole conversation about if you're trying to write a book, that's different than like, I'm writing a book, I am doing it, right? And she suggested having giving yourself, she said, even if you don't have a publisher, give yourself a deadline, like, so that she had a publisher who gave her a deadline, right? She's like, if you're writing and you don't have a publisher that's giving you a deadline, set a deadline for yourself. Like, this needs to be published by this time. And that's exactly what you just suggested as well. So it is a great way to stop overthinking it and just start doing it, right? Like having that timeline and working towards it. And that's great advice. Well, Analiza, we will put the link to your book, The Myths of Success, in the show notes. How else can readers or listeners or viewers find you online or learn more about you and what you're doing?
You can find me at analizawolfe.com, ANALIZA Wolfe, WOLF.com. You can also find me on Instagram or LinkedIn and Facebook, but please feel free to reach out. I love supporting, and especially as an author myself, I know it is a process, and I want to make sure you get to realize whatever it is that your dreams are, and you can make them happen.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for writing your book, which is an inspiration and a kind of a mentorship in itself for women of color in leadership. And thank you for coming on and sharing that story with us and your journey as an author.
Thank you. I forgot to also make a plug for Women of Color Rise, the podcast. I feel like if you can get your stories through the podcast, then it can end up consolidating them into a book. This too can work as a process to get to the end.
Yeah, that's a great tip as well. Well, thank you, Analiza.
Thank you, Kelly.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com.